I'm Don Pfister, and I'm here in Gainesville, Florida, with the Mycological Society of America. And this is part of the Mycological oral history sponsored by Meredith Blackwell. It's the 12th of July, 2022. And I'm here with Giuliana Furci, who's a return interviewee for us. And this is going to be a kind of update of the activities that she's been involved with. So Giuliana, welcome.
Thank you, Don.
Just to briefly introduce those who may not have looked at the other part of this, tell a little bit about yourself and about your activities around fungi.
So my name is Giuliana Furci. I am a Chilean, Italian, and British-born amateur mycologist. My formation is amateur. I wasn't formed in academia. I've been working for the fungi for 23 years. And my path has led me to dedicate my work to the conservation of fungi, impulsing political moves, policy really throughout the world for fungi to be included on par to animals and plants within language in political fora and international fora. And I also have spent a long time documenting the fungi that live in the territory we call Chile, from desert to ice fields in Patagonia.
Yep. And you've written 2 field guides.
Yes, I've written 2 field guides on the fungi of Chile, not only mushrooms. There are some rusts in there and others. And a third one is almost ready.
Oh.
Yeah, so almost ready. Yeah.
So what is the third one?
So the third volume of the field guide currently has close to 120 mostly endemic species of fungi that I've been documenting. That some are very rare. There are quite a few Cortinarius in there, and some species that can be mostly known as the little brown mushrooms that aren't easily identifiable in the field. Yeah, and hopefully some more truffles as well.
Well, with your work, Chile is no doubt one of the best documented in terms of a field guide and field approaches as any country in South America, I would think. Am I right?
Yes, I think
Yeah,
so. Yeah.
good. Be modest. It's okay. Yeah, but they're beautifully photographed.
Yeah.
And those photographs are all yours. Is
Yes.
that right?
Yes, not all of them, but most of them are. I spend a lot of time lying with my stomach to the ground. Thankfully, in the Patagonian forest, we don't have ticks, and we don't have that many leeches, and so we get to lay with the mushrooms. Yeah. Not lie. Yeah.
Well, recently you've done several projects and been involved in several ways that highlight the importance of fungi and trying to place the fungi in parallel with other groups. Do you want to say a little bit more about that?
So I am very upset when I hear fungi being treated as if they were plants or animals. We would never dare treat a rhinoceros as a plant, and we wouldn't give a rhinoceros names that are proper of plants. And I find it extremely unfair, unjust, and upsetting, and actually, frankly, angering that fungi are referred to as plants way too frequently. And so I've spent a lot of time thinking about how to design strategies to delimit language that is specific for fungi, and that's where the 3F proposal comes from. So delimiting the term funga as a valid term that refers to fungal diversity of a given place, just like flora does of plants of a given place and fauna for animals. And at the same time, I spend also a lot of time thinking about how we can stop referring to mycological collections as herbaria collections and should rather be fungaria collections, and trying to eliminate the use of the term mycoflora, of stalk, and others when referring to fungi.
So why does it make a difference?
Because language creates reality. And just like we're seeing in many sociological movements, the importance to say their name, to say our name. Pronouns are a great example. We're all very set on giving our pronouns because we want to be referred to in a respectful way. I feel in a way that I'm trying to delimit the pronouns for fungi so that they can be referred to in a respectful way.
And this will lead to what? Why?
So why,
I'm just trying to get to the basis of,
Yeah.
of why we need this.
Yeah. So fungi are explicitly excluded from a lot of terms of reference for funding opportunities, for example, because there, in these documents, there is a very clear focus of funding for research and for education around plants and animals, or fauna and flora, and fungi don't fit there. So, and if referred to as, life at large or living organisms, there is a very big myco-blindness when choosing where to fund research and education initiatives. So by having an exclusive focus on fungi, we can unlock crucial funding that's necessary for mycology to thrive and to help people and planet thrive. No.
So let's talk about conservation a little bit. Fungal conservation. We go out and talk to people about fungi, and it's often, those are the things that come up in the woods and we sometimes eat them. Well, isn't that what grew on my bread and spoiled the bread? Or, these are diseases too. They ruin crops. Yeah. So why should we think about conservation with these organisms?
Well, for the same reason that we would think of animal pests and plant pests as important, as a part of a group that have conservation priorities. We tend to think of fungi as a few species, right, in the mainstream. So we'll attribute all fungi as being disease, decay, or a decomposer. But as you know better than I do, Don, it's a kingdom of life that holds organisms that are as beneficial as not. So we have to really make an effort to look after the organisms that have the potential to provide the planet with the function needed to continue, and why not humans as well, to provide us with food or with medicine. We can't attribute the
Not so long ago, you told me that you'd gotten into decay, and you thought that it was really such an interesting topic to think about decay. Yeah. Why do you think that? Why is decay a big deal? It ruins my house.
Well, I think it's really important to let things rot. This obsession we have with cleaning gardens and cleaning forests of dead plant matter is also a really important source of rapid liberation of carbon into the atmosphere when people are burning or chopping up wood. The importance of letting decomposition happen at a slow rate is both important and beautiful, I think. I think decay is the source of life. That's why I got into decay. Okay. Because what fungi have taught me is that the end of one life form is nothing but the beginning of many others. And the end of a life form through decay really is just the slow unleashing of the building blocks that enable life to conform again. I think it's one of the most noble processes in nature.
So we're thinking about recycling, basically, that these carbon-rich substrates could be burned or processed in some way, and that carbon would be poof up in the air as carbon dioxide. In the sense of them lying on a forest floor, we're seeing this process go on, but not at the same rate. And that the carbon is one part of this. The other part are nutrients, nitrogen.
And species. Species that live on that decaying wood that would not live on the carbon dioxide.
Yeah. So this is thinking of decay as creating mini ecosystems.
Yes.
So each log is not just the wood that fell to the floor, it's the fungi that are growing on them, often many different fungi, and the organisms that are feeding on the fungi, on the other components, the animals that live in it, and the habitat. So, yeah, so decay is beautiful.
Decay is beautiful, yeah. We've got to let things rot.
That's great.
I'm totally into it now.
Right. When we think about these forest systems, and we're thinking about kind of the sustainability and so forth, we've talked a lot about harvests and commercial harvests of fungi, and particularly thinking about these rapid turnovers that happen with fire, for example. And you've had a campaign about fire and forests.
So Chile is a country that exports several dozens of tons of morels a year. That's the government data. And these morels were thought to be triggered by fires, just like in the US and some parts of the northern hemisphere. So what we were seeing is that as the economic need to harvest and sell morels for export was increasing in Chile, this rumor arrived that you had to burn the native forest so that morels would appear, and could be found. And our forests in southern Chile are old-growth temperate rainforests that do not depend on fire. They are not systems that need fire to germinate seeds, and the animals don't depend on fire to live. So we were seeing intentional burning of old-growth temperate rainforests to trigger morel growth. And the question arose as to whether this was a rumor that had no basis, or whether in fact in Chile the morels that were being harvested were fire triggered. And that's where we came together to try to understand that. And what we found is that the morels are not from a group, a clade that are fire triggered. In fact, many of them are native species that really don't depend at all on fire in any part of their life system. And that campaign was really important to teach people. We had famous people talking on local radios and ads in the local newspapers in the regions where the morels are harvested, teaching them that burning was basically killing the habitat and they would not find any morels for a very long time. So the fire actually decreased. The intentional burns decreased after the campaign.
Well, one of the interesting things that we did was sample market morels. Yeah. And one of the results of that was that none of the ones that we picked up in the market, I'm not sure if you remember, we can look at the manuscript or the draft again, but none of those were fire triggered. And in fact, there's only this one species really that is associated with fire.
And that one was collected in a pine plantation.
It was a pine plantation in the more northern regions.
Imported pines, and so there must have been the Morel imported with the pine.
I'm sure that there's native, or I mean indigenous fire adapted morels, but it's interesting that the market samples showed no signs of being those that were from burns.
And I think the most important thing about that project is a clear example of how science can influence conservation of ecosystems. So, you know, you couldn't approach the harvesters just saying, look, it's very unlikely that these are triggered, you know, the apparition of these morels are triggered by fire, and have a good result. But when one could go and say, look, we know, we have proved, there's proof here that you have no good results with burning, and for that burn to actually stop, I think is a beautiful example of how closely related science and conservation are.
Good. Well, we'll hope that it all comes out fairly soon. Yeah. We've been working on this a long time. Yeah. Yeah.
Good things take a long time, Don.
Well, maybe it's just lack of movement in our part. What else would you like to say? We're talking about mycological history. Yeah. And oral history. You're documenting a moment in time. Yes. What would you say?
I think it's an extremely important moment. We're seeing a mainstream interest for fungi like never before. Things have happened in the last few years that have made children and many children interested in mycology. I think there's a moment to start building mycology into school curricula, you know, on formal levels. I think there's an important moment to teach people that fungi aren't all mushrooms, that there are many other fungi as important, more important in some cases. I would argue that yeast are more important than mushrooms, you know, for humans, for example. And I think it's important to start adopting mycologically inclusive language because there is interest. There is a moment where people are eager to learn, and they might as well learn the right language than have us try to change language that they've learned further on. So I would really like to encourage anybody who sees this to refer to fungal collections and as Fungaria. I would encourage people to even try to use the word sporome and not fruiting body. And I would really encourage mycologists to lead the way in asking for respectful language when referring to fungi, and not zoological or botanical language.